Hello and good evening. Welcome to Dementia Diaries, a caregiver's journey. Tonight, we were scheduled to have a guest with us, but unfortunately, she was not able to make it tonight. So tonight, you will be talking with me and Brittany. Come on screen, Brittany.
Hi, good evening, everyone. Thanks for joining us tonight.
So Brittany is my production assistant for Dementia Diaries, and we both are going to sit here and talk about some of the challenges that we have faced in our lives, and then we are going to ask you to chime in as well, to bring your questions in the chat and any comments that you may have as well. Just want you to know we are going by our own experience. We are not doctors or anything of that nature. So the only thing we can do is offer our advice to what has worked for us. And if someone else has advice, you may do the same. So Brittany, please tell us about yourself.
So I have professional and personal experience with dementia. At a young age, I started working at a nursing home, and it was from there that began my journey working with dementia and all levels of different cognitive decline. So I was age of 6 when I started that journey, and it went on for several years. I worked as a dietary aide on the dementia floor at a nursing home, and I then later became an activities coordinator with the residents. I had a special bond with them from the beginning. I really enjoyed working with them, spending time with them just on my own whenever I had a chance to sit down and chat with them, or just sit in silence and whatever they wanted to do. And so my manager tapped me on the shoulder and asked me if I'd want to move up to an activities coordinator. So from there, I got to be more involved one-on-one with the residents and create activities for all of them to do. And obviously with this population, certain activities are better than others. So coming up with activities such as baking or doing puzzles, different word type games, things of that nature. So I did that for a couple years, and I then graduated high school. And when I moved down to Florida, I became a caregiver, and I was a caregiver for all types of patients. But along the way, I also had dementia patients, specifically Alzheimer's patients, patients with comorbidities. So one in particular that I remember very well was a gentleman who had Parkinson's as well as Alzheimer's. So
tell me about the activities that you came up with for the dementia patients. Were these activities ones that you had to come up with on your own? Did you have to, get to know the patients to see what type of activities that would best suit them? How did that aspect work?
So I just came up with them on my own. So I researched it, and the facility had things in mind already. So I just kind of went off of those things. So it wasn't anything that I had to figure out based on a particular resident's needs or whatnot. They were on the memory care floor. So certain activities were already brought to my attention. From there, I just went off of those ideas, and so came up with different baking ideas, like baking cookies or brownies, just very basic, but some a way for them to be involved in something that they could achieve. And again, doing puzzles, so specifically like the peg wooden puzzles, those seem to work very well. So there's only 6, maybe 8 pieces to those. And so it was nice for them just to have that hand-eye coordination and try to figure out where they go. And coloring, painting. So yeah, I just came up with activities on my own for the most part.
Now, have you had anyone in your family that suffered from dementia/Alzheimer's?
So at the end of my grandmother's life, she was diagnosed with dementia. She passed away at 91. So it was very late. It may have been, I believe, when she was 90, could have been 89, that she was diagnosed with it. But I don't remember. What I remember of my grandmother was not that. So it was very late. I didn't interact with her much. When she was going through those stages. I do know when the final couple times that I did see her, she was significantly smaller in weight. She was very almost skin and bones. She wasn't eating. That's what made them feel like she was declining cognitively. So from there, I remember that when I went to visit her, because she was not local, she was about 2 hours away in a nursing home. And so I went up to visit her, and I was the only one that she would eat for. I was very close to my grandmother. So as soon as she started needing care when she was in her 80s, she moved down by us, and I was with her every day after school. And so, yeah, I'd always been really close to my grandmother. So that was probably one of the reasons why she would eat for me and maybe not others. But yeah, that's the only experience. But again, it wasn't too much directly with her because it was so late in her life. Outside of that, it's more professional experience. And then my mom's boyfriend right now, he was recently diagnosed with Alzheimer's, early stage Alzheimer's, and he's 75 years old.
Okay. So what type of symptoms do you recall? I know you said your grandmother had it in later life, but do you recall when she was staying with you all, or closer to you all, what type of symptoms did she have? Was she remembering you? Meaning, did she remember your names? Her children's names? Was she forgetful? Tell us about that.
Yeah, so as long as I can remember, she remembered everything. She didn't seem off in any way. It really wasn't until later in her life, the very end of her life, where she was starting to decline. And I really don't recall seeing any of those symptoms except for I want to say it was the very last time that I saw her. And that's where she wasn't vocal. She wasn't eating, but she only ate when we took her to her room, and then we tried to feed her in there. That's when I fed her and she was willing to eat. But before that, before those very late stages of her life, she was perfectly fine, all the way cognate. And yeah, I didn't know anything different. She seemed to know everything and everything.
Okay. Now, you said your mother's friend has been diagnosed with dementia as well, right? Do you know anything about what made her think to take him to the hospital, go to the doctor, or what made him think to go to the doctor? What do you know what was happening with him?
Yes. So he repeated himself a lot. And I know that when he's been down here to visit, because he lives up in Minnesota, where we're originally from. But ever since they started dating, and it's been about 8 years now, even 8 years ago, he was repeating himself a lot. He would tell the same stories over and over again, as if he hadn't said them before. And then me not being around him, I don't know all the ins and outs of the different things, but from what my mom mentioned, there would be times where he didn't know where he put his wallet or his keys. I remember one time, ultimately, he ended up finding it in the freezer. I think it was his wallet, may have been his keys, one or the other, he found in the freezer. And so just, putting things in random places that they're certainly not supposed to be. And just things like that. So that was one thing I remember, the repeating. As far as taking care of himself, all of that is still intact. There's no issues. He drives everywhere. There was a period of time where routes that he had gone several times, he wasn't remembering. So he had to take my mom to the doctor. She was going to the doctor quite regularly and going to that same doctor over and over. And there was a period of time where they like got lost like multiple times trying to get there, and ultimately couldn't make the appointment because of that. And so those are some of the things that she shared with me. And it was very tough for her to be in that position because she is, quote unquote, an outsider. So trying to first get him to understand that there are some concerns she's seeing, and then at the same time trying to get his family to understand that there are some valid concerns. The family was very reluctant, much in denial, just like he was. And it took a annual exam. He's very good about going to the doctor very regularly. So it took the doctor saying, hey, we're noticing some cognitive issues. Let's proceed with some tests. And that's where the family ultimately understood that, okay, maybe Carolyn had some valid concerns, and they moved forward. And ultimately, he got diagnosed with Alzheimer's, and he's now on medication, and he seems to be thriving. So I'm thankful for that.
Okay. Do you know what type of medication he's on?
I don't know the name.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we have a comment here that the family is, most of the time, the family is in denial. I guess it's hard to believe. I can take it from my standpoint. It's kind of hard to believe that this person, this loved one that you've known forever, all your life. In my place, my mom, to see her change from being that vibrant, get going individual to her decline. So yes, I would agree that there's always denial in the families. Now, we did have a question come through as well. So we have an individual whose mother she has cancer. And the question basically is, how do we know if she's in dementia? If so, what stage? And how do you tell the difference? Because she's on morphine, and with morphine, you're in and out. So how would they know that their loved one has dementia? Well, that's a question that's I can't answer from a medical perspective. It's something that you're going to have to, if you're going to take your mom to the doctor, they're going to have to run the test to see if she has dementia or not. But, it comes with, there are some signs that always come, they're repeating, losing things, not remembering names and all of those types of things. So that's normally a given with some of the symptoms that people have with dementia. And it may not come, have it all the time, but, like you said with your grandmother, it could be just, a year or so without, anyone not even knowing that they have dementia. So that's hard to answer, and it's hard to tell because each person is different. If anybody else out there have any comments to that question, please put them in the chat, and we would relay that message to the individual as well. So, Brittany, how did you deal with the fact of your grandmom having dementia at a young age, at your young age? How did you deal with that? How did you feel?
At that time, I was, I guess, 17, I believe, or it may have started when I was 16, but it was tough to see her like that. It probably would have been even tougher if it was a longer period of time that I saw her like that. But yeah, as I said earlier, I don't even really remember her outside of her thriving and just naturally aging. The dementia part of it to me was a very minimal part of her life. So I really don't even remember much of it. I just remember it just being very tough to see her when I did see her like that. And I believe I only saw her.
And when you say that was tough, when you say that it was tough to see her like that, what do you mean by that? And how did you move through, those times when you did see her down like that?
Yeah, so just seeing her look so sickly, so being so skinny, that was just hard to see. Her being nonverbal, that was hard. I remember, I told her I loved her. She told me she loved me back. So that was beautiful. And I remember, I think this was the last visit that we saw her. My brother was not with us, but I put the phone up to my grandmother's ear. He talked to her. She knew who he was. She acknowledged him, told him that she loved him. So I guess at least she knew who we were. That was great. And maybe it was for her, maybe it was the early stages of dementia. And it was just her also just naturally aging at the same time and ultimately passing away not long after. And I'm sorry, I don't even know the time frame of how long that was, but yeah, so it was just difficult to see her like that. And obviously, because knowing it was just the end of her life anyway, it was all around tough. I was really affected by my grandmother passing.
Okay. So we do have a response in the chat to the question about how do you tell if the individual is starting dementia or not and they're on morphine. So we have one individual that said that morphine is a comfort medication for pain. So if someone has cancer, they're likely to be in a lot of pain. So that's why they're taking the morphine. Dementia, like I stated before, you would see some signs of forgetfulness, repeating things, saying it all over, constantly. I know that was one issue or one symptom that my mom had. She would tell you something and then she would tell you something again and you would hear it again and you would hear it again. And, in those situations, sometimes it can be overwhelming to hear the same questions over and over and over. And, you have to find some way somehow within yourself to be okay with that and just understand that it's the disease, because telling that individual that, you've already asked me that, you've already told me that, they'll probably say, no, I didn't, because their mind, their memory is not there. It's blank. So you would have to come to some, like I said, some way, whether you're going to rely on your faith, whether you're going to rely on, meditation, whatever it is you're going to rely on, you're going to have to come to cope to be able to cope with that. So there are a lot of things that you're going to find, even with the medication, making sure that you give their right amount of medication, make sure you're giving the appropriate medication that's been assigned. Sometimes, you have family members, where medication has been assigned and some may say, well, no, she doesn't need this or he doesn't need that, and so you're going through that. But so you have to come to terms with, okay, well, this is what I'm going to do. This is the best. This is the best for my family member, my loved one. And, these are the things that you have to look out for. But yes, if you're giving, medication or something of that sort, you need to monitor. So it is a monitor factor, whether you are a caregiver yourself or whether you have, someone coming in to, take care of your parent or your loved one. There always should be a log. I know that's one thing that we kept was a log. And that log contains, when my mom woke up, when she had when she had a shower, when she took her medication, when she ate, how much she ate, when she had a bowel movement. All of that stuff comes into play so you can kind of keep track of what's going on. So if something out of the norm would happen, you should be able to look at that log. So it's very important for whomever is, caring for the loved one that they do that. So the next person, if it's another sibling or if it's a, home health aide individual, the next time they come in, they can look at the book and see what happened the day before. And it also helps too when you have hospice nurses and doctors come in, they can look at the book as well, and it can help with, prescribing medications or removing them from certain medications or, saying they need to do this or saying they need to do that. So there's a whole factor of things that go in with, caring for a loved one that has dementia. Another thing I would say about it is, what we found was doing some of the things that that loved one likes. If that loved one likes to read and they're not able to read at that time, you can sit beside that individual and read to them. One of the things we did with my mom is I would sit there and read to her, the scriptures, the Bible, scriptures from the Bible. And she would literally read with me, and it amazed me so much because her memory is going in and out. But she knew those scriptures, so she didn't really need to see them. And then also, she liked to sing. So we would get together and all of us would get together and start singing with her. And then she would start singing too. And we would be so, teary-eyed and say, oh my God, she's singing. But, giving them something that they know about and can relate to is very important as well. You were going to say something, Brittany?
Yeah, a couple things. So just going back to the journaling, even if it's early stages and you may not even think that it's needed at that time to start writing things down, it's very important because over time, that will be something everyone caring for that person can look back at and see how things have progressed and where changes need to be made. So journaling from the beginning is 100% something that everyone should consider because it's so important to have that written down, because going through the day-to-day as a caregiver, we're going to get exhausted, and months from now, years from, we're not going to remember everything. So writing those things down as soon as you start to notice changes in the person's behavior. Another thing, aggression or mood swings are another side effect of dementia. So that can be very hard to deal with as well. And when there are compounding or comorbidities, so multiple illnesses at one time, so similar to what our guest was asking, when there's other things going on, it's very hard to decipher what is happening. Is this happening? Is it not? And that's where obviously the medical professionals come into play. But when there are other things going on, misdiagnosis could certainly come up. So just being mindful, asking all the questions, writing things down as they come. I know that's one of the things I told my mom to do is start to write things down that she notices, start to write questions down that she has, because when it comes time to where she does have that chance to speak to somebody, she can have all of that right there. And if she wasn't able to go to the doctor with them, if it was, because ultimately her friend's daughter is the caregiver on paper. So even if it's just giving her the list of questions or thoughts that my mom had, so when they go to the doctor together, she can talk for my mom. But also too, I forgot the second thing I was going to say. What were you speaking of last?
Oh, Brittany, I don't know.
I'll think of it.
But I will say this, as you were talking about the journaling piece, yes, it's important to, put down what's going on, on a daily basis. But, I found it as a caregiver, it's nice to journal or record, different conversations that you would have with your loved one too. My family knows, I don't know, a lot of people online don't know this, but, I kind of look into my family history, so I'm that person that goes back to my ancestors to see where we came from, to see what type of diseases or, something that they may have passed away from. And, doing that tells part of the story, of what happened, but not only that though, lots of times when you find people with dementia, they tend to think about things that happened a long time ago in their childhood or early life. And you can find out so many stories, so many stories. You know, some of them you're going to have to confirm with, one of your older relatives to make sure that was, there during that time frame. But you can find out so much history from that individual if you just let them talk. But I did find that if they're talking and you start asking questions, it will shut down. So if you're one of those people that, like to get information and, just hear your loved one talking about something that happened a long time ago, record it, jot it down, because that way you can pass that information on to, your children and your children's children on down the line. So I found that helpful as well.
Yeah, and actually that reminded me of what I was going to say. So one activity that's really beneficial is taking a shoebox and putting different images. So back from the childhood or the years, whatever may have been the 1920s, 30s, 40s, 50s, the range of years, and putting different images. It could be whatever kind of car was popular at that time, whatever movie, music, whatever it is, and just printing out these images and then letting them pick from it. And then they just pull out the image. And when they look at it, they'll reflect on what that means to them. So that's another activity that I used. And it was really fun. And people talked forever. They enjoyed it. So that's a good idea to do with your loved one, or if you happen to be, in a professional relationship with dementia patients. But anything to get them talking, and like you said, not interrupting, let them just go on. And that brings up another point. When people are repeating themselves, to your point earlier, don't tell them they've already said it. Go along with whatever they're saying, even if they're telling a story that's not really making sense, or it's fictitious. Just go along with it. And it's if you interrupt or try to not go along with the conversation, it's only going to cause frustration. So
yeah, that is true.
I learned like one of my clients was the one that actually has as well. He was a retired veterinarian. And so when I would come into his room every morning, he would think that I was a patient bringing in my animal. And so he would start to talk to me as if he was servicing my animal. And I just went along with him because I didn't want to stop that. And so that was interesting. But, there's nothing wrong with that. You'd be creating another issue if you were to stop that from happening. So, and again, that's where stories are told and things are found out if you just let things go and, ride with it. So.
Yeah, you brought something to my mind, to my memory with my mother. My mother told people that she worked for Hillary Clinton. Oh my God. And that she raised Chelsea. And, you just let her tell the story. And one day I asked her, I said, well, Mom, if you raised Chelsea, where was I? She said, you were right there. I said, okay, I know, I sure was. You just let it go. Some of the stories be so funny, and you can look back on some of those stories and memories, and you just sit there and laugh. That's what I recommend. We all, especially for those that loved one has passed away, and you have the grieving process. I always tell people, yes, definitely, we miss her, we miss him, right? But think about those good times, and then once you start laughing, remembering and laughing, and it just turns into something different. Instead of it being a strain on your heart, it turns into a joy. You become joyous about that individual. So that's something I would recommend as well. Even if your loved one has not passed, just laugh with them as much as possible. As a caregiver, like you said, it's very draining, and sometimes you need a way out. You need a way out, and you just have to find those ways of doing it. Laughter. When they're asleep, just sitting back and trying to relax. Reading a book or stuff like that. You have to find your way to release some of the stress. And I know for us, we used to use a video camera for my mom. So my mom has stayed down. She had a place in the room downstairs, and I had a sister that was there too. But it says we used to keep a video camera so we could watch, whatever was going on with her. Not only what was going on with her, but watching also what was going on with the home caregivers as well. Especially when the people that you have coming in, because one of the things you want to do is make sure that they are taking care of your loved one, and not ignoring them or treating them in ways that they should not be treated. So I would recommend having cameras, like a baby monitor. Yes, it doesn't have to be anything expensive, just a baby monitor. Another thing I found out, and we're going to have a guest that's going to talk to us in June about this. He said that he found that when you find your loved one is not eating, try to put the food in a red plate. He says because for some reason that color red gets them to eat. So that was one suggestion that he had that we can pass on as well. Then we have a comment here that says, some of the things that these are some of the things that I do with my mom. I try to explain to my other family members. Sometimes they may say, take my shoes off, even though they're not on. I always act like I'm taking them off. Exactly. Take the shoes off or act like you're taking them off. If you gotta iron some clothes or put the clothes in the laundry, just do that. And I tell you, these things will come back and make you smile and make you laugh, and just those moments. So if we have any other questions from the audience here, you can please type them in the chat, and we will try our best to respond to them or give you your comments. Brittany, anything else you would like to share?
I just would like to talk about the importance of the caregiver caring for themselves. So obviously we get so consumed by caring for somebody else, and we really can't do that to the highest level unless we're taking care of ourselves. And I know it's difficult. I've essentially been a caregiver in several different ways since a young child. And so I know what it's like to constantly have somebody to care for, and not always feel like taking care of myself, especially, as I became an adult until this day. But it's so extremely important because you will not be able to give your best self if you're not taking care of yourself. So I know it may be hard. You may be the only one who could be that caregiver for your loved one. But find ways to get some reprieve. If it is maybe just for a week or a day or two, hiring somebody to come in and step in your place, or whatever it may be, or speaking with a friend who might be able to step in your place, if that is a possibility, if everyone involved is comfortable with that. But it's so important that you take time for yourself, even if, to Janet's point, taking 10 minutes just to lay back in the chair or take some time to read, go outside and take a walk, whatever it may be, but just make sure that you're taking time for yourself. Every little bit helps, and obviously the more the better, but it's so important. And not only physically taking care of yourself and getting that time to just have that downtime by yourself or getting in some exercise, but eating healthy foods, just mind, body, and soul. You have to take care of it all, because you want to be your best self for that person. And that's just really important, because a lot of times we we get away from that because we're so worried about, we don't want to let our loved one down, and we feel guilty stepping away. Don't feel guilty.
Yeah, it's very overwhelming, and you do have to release that stress, and it's best to release the stress in one of the ways that you've mentioned, Brittany, versus, taking it out on the loved one. I'm gonna throw that out there because we hope that it doesn't happen, but it may happen in some cases. You may treat this individual just a little bit more rougher than you would normally do it. But yes, please don't do that. But it's hard. It's a reality. It's hard, and unfortunately, some of us have to be put in that space as a caregiver. But you always got to remember you're in that space of that caregiver because you love that individual, and you must realize that, again, that what they're going through, it is a disease, right? It's nothing that they're doing on their own. It's nothing that, if you have ones that are aggressive or ones that are just, I'll cuss you out in a minute. You got all types. You got some that are quiet and whatever, but it's the disease. It's not them. So you always have to keep that in mind, and you always need to, like I said before, when they're asleep, just sit back and take that, relax. You have to. And I know it's even harder for people that only, they have that only one person. It's just them that does it. But all I can say is bless you, because it is definitely tough. Even if we had 7 of us, and it was tough on each of us. So I know that one individual that's only doing it, I know it's just really very hard. Like I said, overwhelming is not really the word for it. I don't know if there's a word that can describe that feeling, but as long as you keep focused on what is happening and what the goal is to make this individual as comfortable as possible. And remember, it's not personal. Like somebody said in the chat, it's not personal. So don't treat it as something personal. Your loved one, if it's your parent or your mother, they raised you, they brought you into this world, they took care of you as a child, up through, elementary, middle school, high school, and sometimes even after that. It's just your turn to help take care of your loved one.
Yeah. And there's help out there. There's resources. So if anyone needs assistance locating some resources, we're more than happy to point you in the right direction. But there are resources out there, even when you feel that there may not be, or you don't know if you can afford it, or whatever the situation may be. There are resources out there. So if you're not able to find any, just reach out to us and we'll be able to help you point you in the right direction.
Yes. And on that point, if you get to a point where you're overwhelmed and you need to talk to someone, reach out to us at DementiaDiaries podcast at gmail.com, or you can reach us through our Facebook page at just Dementia Diaries, and it should come through our message. Yes, if you need to talk to someone, if you're feeling overwhelmed, if you want to be a guest on the show and tell your story as well so that it may help someone else, please reach out to us for that as well. But at this point, I would like to thank you, Brittany, for joining on the show with me tonight in short notice. It's been wonderful. And, Brittany will be joining us back again because she is a life coach or health coach. Told me about that. So, she'll be talking about some of the services that she may be able to provide to some of our listeners as well. So, but once again, thank you for joining us. And we look forward to seeing you next week. Remember, this show tonight was supposed to have been a repost of the one that was supposed to happen a few weeks ago, but we had some technical difficulties. But we will be back next Thursday at 7:00 p.m. Thank you so much for joining us, and have a good night.
Thank you, guys. Take care.